Welcome to Rick Rack Ruby. I'm Laura Cluvo. This is Craftmas 2021. Today's project is a candy cane gnome angel girl. She's fun and easy, so let's get started. Let's start with the face. A wooden bead, unfinished, which is about 3/4 of an inch. We'll start with the eyes. I'm using my Woodburning tool. I'll just touch, boop, boop. I'm going to do 3 faces. There are the eyes. And then I have a Pigma Micron 01 permanent fine tip marker in brown. I like this marker for the eyelashes and the eyebrows. That looks good. For the nose, I'm going to use the same marker in red. Boop. And then the mouth like this. Just a happy little smile. The nose and the mouth. The nose and the mouth. And then finally, I'll add some cheeks. I usually work on a paper plate or an index card or something like that, just to avoid getting the blush on my surface here. So I have 3 options for faces. Either one of them will work, but meanwhile we need to prep our hat. So I've made a pattern. This is 3.5 inches across and 2.5 inches tall. So I cut a piece from felt with those dimensions, and I will pin up this diagonal seam, and I'm going to stitch that with a 3/16 inch seam allowance. I like sewing from the bottom to the top. Here's the hat. I seamed up that diagonal edge, and I'm going to trim off the points from the bottom and the top. Maybe even a little bit of the seam allowance. And then I'll turn this right side out. There we go. I used a chopstick and a large needle to pull that point out. And now before I go any further, I'm just going to fold under the front brim of the hat like this and secure it with a little bit of glue. So I'll show you just the front, and then it tapers off to the sides. I don't really have to do anything for it to taper, it just kind of automatically does it. So I squeezed a little bit of hot glue into there, and then I'm going to fold up just a tiny bit, just not even 1/4 of an inch, right in the front center. And this will be the hat. And then the last thing we need to prep is the braid. I'm using 2 strands of Red Heart Dreamy acrylic yarn, each piece about 4 feet long. And then I'm going to crochet this. I'm going to make a chain. So I started off with the slip stitch, and I'm leaving these tails. That's plenty of length. And then I'm just going to make a crochet chain. I can use a hook, but I just found it easier just to do it by hand. So I pull this loop tight around my finger, then push it through, pull it tight, and then I just keep working it all the way to the end. It doesn't have to be perfect. See how it looks? It's not exactly like a braid, but it gives you the impression of a braid. And of course, if you prefer, you can just braid 3 pieces of yarn together. As I'm getting to the end, I'm just going to put the final end through the loop and just pull that tight, and that'll be the end. That looks like perfect length, and I'm going to trim these to 1 inch. Now I have my braid, I have my hat, I have a face, and I have some tulle. I'm using red tulle, and I have a piece of red and white baker's twine on a nice big needle. I'm tying the ends of the twine into a little overhand knot, and then I'm going to pull off 2 pieces of the 6-inch tulle, 6-inch wide, and 2 lengths about 15 inches long. There we go. Then with both of these pieces together, I'm folding this in half, and I'm just going to loop this through here so that the baker's twine is right in the center of the tulle like this. That looks good. And then I'm going to thread this onto the head from the bottom to the top, pulling the tulle all the way through the center of that head bead like that, just until the top of the tulle is right at the top of the head. Then I'm going to back it up a little bit, add a little bit of glue right here. There we go. And now I'm going to take the braid, fold it in half to determine the center right here, and I'm actually going to sew through the center of the braid. So right through the middle at the top. Pull that down onto the top of her head like this. That looks good. And then I'm going to add a little bit of glue here to secure the braid on each side, here and here. Just right down the sides of her head. Like that, and then just press that in. Good, that looks good. Here's how it looks so far. Got her tulle, her face, her braids, and this hanging loop. Now I'm going to sew this right through the top of the hat, through the point of the hat. And then the front of the hat goes to the front of her face, the part that I already tucked under. And then the back of the hat covers the back of her head. All right, so this is how she's going to look. I'm going to lift up the back here and apply some glue to the back of her head. And press the back of the hat onto the back of her head. Nice and secure. I don't want it too low in the front though. That looks good. Everything looks good. So I'm going to tie this off for a hanging loop now. That's about 5 inches. And there we go, we're on our way. All right, now let's make her dress. So I have 3 5-inch squares, and I will stitch them together with the candy canes in the center. So I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and stitch up these side seams. I've sewn these 5-inch squares together, and now I'm going over to my ironing board to press the seam allowances flat. I've pressed my seam allowances flat, and now I'm going to apply some of this. It's called Wila wedding lace. It's a little less than 1 inch wide, and it's a white color. I got this at Joann Fabrics. You can use anything you like. I'm not going to turn up the hem. If you are a perfectionist, you are very welcome to hem this first and then to add the lace. So I'm just going to lay this over about 1/4 of an inch up from the edge, and I'm going to do a tiny little zigzag over the thickest part of the header right here. Here's how it looks. And now I'm going to match these sides, which will be the back seam, and sew up the back with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Here's the seam, and here's how the inside of the bottom edge looks, where I zigzagged over the lace. So now I'll turn this to the right side. This will be the front, and this will be the back. I'm going to gather up the top edge and gather it around her neck. Now I'll gather up the top edge, starting in the back. I'm using a double strand of off-white quilting thread, and I'm just going to gather up with a running stitch in and out all the way around through a single layer of fabric. And then I use a thimble. And I'm just going to go all the way around. There I am back to where I started. I'll draw this tight. That looks good. This will be the front, and this will be the back. So I'll slip her through this little opening. So I'm pulling it up, right up against her chin here. I'm going to center this candy cane square. And then in back, I'm going to try to get underneath the hat, the very back point of the hat, and pull it nice and tight. That looks good. And then I'll stitch back and forth and around a few times to secure. I'm not too worried about the neatness because I have a lace collar that will go over this. That looks good. And now I'll trim out her petticoat. Now for the lace collar, I have about 18 inches of flat lace that's almost an inch wide. I think I measured it and it was about 7/8 of an inch. So I'll just start at one end and then stitch all the way to the opposite end with a little running stitch, in and out all the way to the end. There we go, there's her collar. And I'll place this around her neck. And I'm going to join the ends in the back. That looks good. So I will secure my thread in the back. That looks good. I have a nice long piece of baker's twine. And I'm going to stitch it through the top of her collar right here and tie a bow. Now a solid red string would be nice too, because I don't think this is going to show up very well against all the candy canes, but it's still going to be a nice little accent right at her chin and where her collar is. In this case, I think I'm going to just finish this with an overhand knot right there. It's a little bit clunky at the center, but I just don't want to add any glue there. And I think that's going to be good. So I did kind of long loops and long streamers. I'm going to tie off each streamer into an overhand knot to prevent them from fraying. Now let's give her a halo. For this halo, I'm going to do the, what is this called? The egg dip, the egg dip style. So this is like when you're dyeing eggs and you dip them in the dye, that's the shape. So there's a circle and then a stem. And this is going to go over her hat. And I'm going to glue this little stem right there against the back seam. And then you can arrange this however you like. It can come out forward or up high or even down a little low or straight, however you like it. So I will apply some glue right here. And I'm going to press the stem into that glue. Now remember, this will be covered up by the wings, so don't worry if it's not super neat. Okay, now I want to talk about the paper that I use for the wings. It's called It's Gnome Time, and this was recommended to me when I was on Amazon looking for something, who knows. And it came through my feed and I thought, wow, that looks really cute, right? And I did show this in yesterday's video, but just in case you're not watching this in sequence, I wanted you to know where I got this. The paper that I'm using today is just the dots. It's this one right here. But I just wanted to show you that there's lots of really super cute options in this pad of paper. And it's very inspiring to me. However, just in case they don't have this exact pad of paper anymore, if you do a search for Gnome scrapbooking paper, there's lots and lots of options. So I've chosen the white wing with the red polka dots, and I think that's going to look the best. I have a couple of options. I mean, they're all good, don't get me wrong. There's the mushrooms, which I think that's just a little bit busy. And this is the hearts, but I used that in another project, so I'm going to stick with this one. And the instructions for my wings, I have a whole video on how to do my wings, but I did cut this out with a die cutter and folded the circle in half. And then I did a little zigzag around here. But if you don't have this exact die or a die cutter, you're not interested in that, you can just cut out a circle and fold it in half and then stitch it and then cut out with a scalloping shear or even a pinking shear. And that's what I used to do before I had a die cutting machine. So this one is about 4 3/8. I'm going to squeeze out some glue right here in the center, a little disc of glue. And then I'm going to press that onto the back of her head, about right like that. I think I might add a little bit more glue in there and kind of glue it to the back of her collar as well. That feels a little more secure. And then finally, I want to add a little holly sticker right onto her hat. These are the glitter holly stickers from Jolie's Boutique. I'll add a little bit of hot glue to the wrong side. And I'll just stick that to the brim of her hat, like this, to one side. That looks good. There's her hanging loop, her braids. And the braids could be any color. The bow could be ribbon or something different if you like. Of course, the wings could be any kind of paper, and the dress could be any fabric. So you have a lot of options, but she's going to look like a gnome as long as she has a gnome hat and her gnome braids and her little gnome face. I hope you like it. Thank you for watching my tutorial. If you're enjoying my videos, please like, share, and subscribe.